The New Orleans Pelicans have now shifted from being open to moving most of the roster to actively shopping 3 of their core players on this team. We'll talk a little bit about that. Apparently, the Suns and the Heat are still discussing a deal circling around Bradley Beal and Jimmy Butler. And we're also going to talk about on today's episode, is it time to start talking about the Memphis Grizzlies as a contender for the NBA title? We're going to get into all that and more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into the content for today, y'all. I want to start off with this one. So apparently, the Pelicans have now shifted to actively shopping Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, and CJ McCollum. It seems like they're also content with keeping DeJounte Murray if it does come down to that. We had previously heard that Herb Jones and Trey Murphy III were part of the untouchable players on this roster. Well, it seems like DeJounte Murray, they're content with keeping him. Doesn't mean that he's not necessarily available, but it is that they are content with keeping him. And we'll see, of course, how that goes. But this one, according to The Athletic, say this. With the deadline fast approaching, the Pelicans star trio is reportedly being shopped. This was a Q&A as part of the on December 21st. He also said this is that the Pelicans are content with keeping DeJounte Murray, Trey Murphy III, and Herb Jones on its roster, making their asking price higher than that of their star teammates. Based on the intel, Trey Murphy and Herb Jones are at a certain level for them to want to keep. It seems like Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, and CJ McCollum are the 3 guys they've been shopping more in terms of core starters. DeJounte Murray has not. So that actually shifts. Like when the rumor came out about the Pelicans being able to move or being open to moving off most of the roster, one of the players that I thought could net them a lot back is DeJounte Murray if they make him available on the trade deadline. Now, it does seem like they are still willing to move him in the right deal, but not necessarily looking to to actively shop him. But they are actively shopping Zion, Brandon Ingram, and CJ McCollum. And that's really should be not a shock at this point. I think the Zion Williamson shock is kind of wore off as now it's been like kind of just looked at more about his injury and the contract. And it just seems like the Pelicans had kind of built this in when they re-signed Zion, is that they understood that if Zion could not stay healthy sooner rather than later, it was going to lead to this, right? Now, Brandon Ingram, he's a player that while he's played a lot of positions for this team, he kind of it seems like they just are ready to move on into a new era. And CJ McCollum, he's a vet that he's undersized. He can still score really well. And I do think that a contender looking for some scoring, especially if they want some firepower in there, maybe coming off the bench, and a team like the Denver Nuggets who, reportedly were interested in Zach LaVine, but it seems like that deal may end up falling apart. Maybe they pivot to CJ McCollum. So there's a lot of kind of teams that can make some sense for CJ. Brandon Ingram, I do think that, we heard that the market for Brandon Ingram maybe wasn't as high as the Pelicans had initially hoped, but I do think he's still a player out there that somebody's going to take a bite at leading into the trade deadline. The biggest question mark here is Zion, right? And despite us knowing what Zion can be when he's able to be on the basketball court, that's the biggest question, is that you just cannot bet at this point for Zion Williamson to be on the basketball court. The Pelicans have the worst record in the Western Conference. They also do own their own first-round pick this year, which means that this is a year that if they're going to move on from this roster and just be bad, they picked a good year to do it because, hey, I tell you what, there's a lot of talent at the top end of this draft, and if the Pelicans end up getting lucky and moving on from a franchise player and getting the number 1 overall pick, which is the same thing that happened when they moved on from Anthony Davis, I'm going to start screaming conspiracy theory. Just my own personal opinion, even though it's like, is the NBA trying to help the Pelicans? Nonetheless, so that's what you have to look at for. And ultimately, we'll see. Like the Pelicans are one of a few teams that are looking to move off some of its roster. We know them, the Brooklyn Nets, the Portland Trailblazers have a few pieces, the Utah Jazz, the Chicago Bulls. These are all teams that really could be looking to move off a lot of his roster between now and the February trade deadline. The question is how many of these players are actually going to be moved? just by those teams that I named, that's millions and hundreds of millions of dollars that could be moved around the trade deadline. And typically, we've seen some active trade deadlines, but that would make it kind of one of the most expensive trade deadlines in NBA history as well. If we see a lot of these players move, that's not even to mention Jimmy Butler, Bradley Beal, right? Some of these other players as well who are in there. So this could be a very interesting trade deadline to watch, and the Pelicans are one of the teams that could make it interesting. And probably on tomorrow's episode, even though it's going to be Christmas, I may drop an episode just talking about which teams and ranking the teams that may be looking to shop, be sellers, blow it up, depending on however you want to look at it, which one kind of has the best assets. So be on the lookout for that. But we'll see what the Pelicans end up doing. Another one that is taking a wait-and-see approach is the Miami Heat when it comes to Jimmy Butler. Now, we've heard something different just about every day with this one. This one came out today. This one came out actually from the Arizona Republic saying this: negotiating surrounding a trade between the Miami Heat and Phoenix Suns involving Jimmy Butler and Bradley Beal are ongoing. As for Bradley, sources inform the Republic that there are still conversations about a deal with Miami involving Jimmy Butler. And this is we've heard actually the opposite of this yesterday that I covered it, right? Is that we heard, from I believe it was Mark Stein, that there's reluctance. There have been no signs that Bradley Beal would be willing to waive his no trade clause to facilitate a deal to the Miami Heat. You pair in with that as well, hearing that the Miami Heat are in no rush, to trade Jimmy Butler because they're gonna call his bluff on becoming a free agent at the end of the year because there's only one team right now that could offer him the contract outright. And then the Miami Heat could very well not look to do a signing trade. So this whole saga with Jimmy Butler potentially being moved or not, it'll be interesting if something happens. I still err on the side that I just don't think anything's going to happen, right? I think eventually, the Miami Heat may make a move that actually strengthens their chance in the run for the playoffs this year, and they may just ride it out. And Pat Riley is a guy that if he feels like there's a glimmer of hope, he's going to ride it out. And Jimmy Butler's a competitor, right? It's not like Jimmy Butler's not going to be out there competing. The Miami Heat right now at 14-13 still sit at 6 in the Eastern Conference, even though that still puts them a half a game out of being in the play-in, falling to the 8th seed. But, they still have a chance here, and they're still trying to figure out their offense. Tyler Herro's having a really good season. Bam starting to wake up after a slow start. So, we'll see there. And we heard, last week as well, that the Miami Heat could actually be looking to make a move for a center to move Jimmy Butler back to the 4. At that time, it was reported as Nikola Vucevic, but it could be some of the other centers that are available in the market as well. So the Miami Heat are another team that, of course, are interesting to watch because you just don't know what the hell the Heat are going to do, right? They could Pat Riley could wake up one day and determine, you know what? Fine. Who wants Jimmy? Highest bidder, whatever our best offer is that we get for Jimmy, we'll pull the trigger between now and the trade deadline. You guys got about 6 weeks to sell us. That could very well be what's going to happen here, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case. But I think, ultimately, Pat Riley's going to try to put his team in the best position. He does not have an appetite to fully rebuild, right? So he wants to kind of build on the fly, retool on the fly, keep adding the Heat culture, all that type of thing. You have one of the best coaches in the league in Eric Spoelstra. So you have a lot of reason that you can incorporate guys and figure it out if you have the right talent. So we'll see what the Miami Heat do. Let me know what you guys think down below. In hearing this, that there are active trade conversations reportedly between the Miami Heat and the Phoenix Suns, but there's so many different things that would need to happen to align and make this deal happen. One of the biggest things there, bring Bradley Beal waiving his no-trade clause. Do you think a deal gets done? Do you think Jimmy Butler's moved at all? Let me know all that down below. Now, outside of trade rumors, which has been dominating this podcast here a lot lately, of course, because there's been so much, I want to talk some basketball. And the team that I want to focus on with that is the Memphis Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies right now are number 3 in the Western Conference. They were just number 2, a day ago, but that's just how it can go. They're a half game back of being number 2 in the Western Conference and 4 games back of the number 1 seed, OKC Thunder. But the reason why I want to talk about this Memphis Grizzlies team is that they are not nearly talked about at the same level, and even I would say even the Houston Rockets, right? And teams talk about the Dallas Mavericks as a contender more than necessarily the Memphis Grizzlies. Of course, the Denver Nuggets. These are teams that are below the Memphis Grizzlies right now. And I want to lay out a case here, right? First, I want to ask the question, should the Memphis Grizzlies be talked about more as a contender to come out the Western Conference? The Thunder, the Celtics, the Cleveland Cavaliers, they're getting really a lot of love in the league so far. And, and even then when you look at teams that dominate the headlines, of course, the Lakers, the Golden State Warriors, the New York Knicks, these are all teams that more so get talked about than the Memphis Grizzlies. But the Grizzlies are 20-10 on the season. They're the number 3 seed in the Western Conference, as I said before, and they have a plus minus of plus 9.7 net rating that ranks 4th overall in the NBA. Another thing that's impressive about this Memphis Grizzlies team is that they are not only top in offense, they are top 5 offense and top 10 defense. They're 4th best offense, 4th best defense in the league. And what have we talked about? That is something that makes contenders when you're able to play on both sides of the ball. And that's something as well, like we know the saying, defense wins championships, offense gets you in the door, right? The Grizzlies are a team that can do it on both sides. You look at it right now. They're scoring really efficiently. They're rebounding well, and they're forcing missed shots at the rim overall. When you look at it right now, they have a 12-3 record against the Eastern Conference, and they're 13-3 at home overall. The Memphis Grizzlies are playing some of the best overall basketball in the league. And I want to talk about why. Why should they be contenders, right? One, depth. They have 7 players that are putting up double figures, and not one of those players is playing over 30 minutes a game. Memphis has already played 11 different starting lineups, and regardless of that, they have not missed a beat yet. And if this team can stay healthy and be healthy at the right time, which they haven't really been able to do in a while, their 4th best offense, their 4th best defense puts them in a situation and position to where they could give any team in the league fits. And yes, even the OKC Thunder, right? Then you look at how their offense is able to play as well as it is. It's the pace that they play with. The Memphis Grizzlies right now are number 1 in transition frequency and pace right now. That's per cleaning the glass. And they're number 1 in transition frequency and number 2 in transition points as well, right? And so when you look at that, the way that the Memphis Grizzlies are able to put up pace, right? And that could wear opposing teams down. But we see a lot of teams playing with faster pace now. But being number 2 in transition points added as well per game, that's huge for a team like the Memphis Grizzlies that's young, that looks at it when you look at it as well, right? Desmond Bane, 33.8% transition frequency. Scottie Pippen Jr., 31.8. Ja Morant, 31. Jalen Wells, 29. John Kocher as well, 40%, right? These are players that they get out and run, and when they do, listen, those plays in transition, how creative they get out in transition, it keeps opposing defenses on their heels, right? And of course, contact matters as well. You don't want to run just to run, but they're able as well to kind of dictate half court and play well in half court as well. And that's another thing. Points in the paint, or just their paint defense. Let's start off with the paint defense as well. Right now, when they're the number 1 paint defense in the NBA. I'm sorry, well, scoring points in the paint in the NBA. They attack, right? The way that they are able to score in the paint is crazy. They keep driving, they drive, and they kick, and they drive, and they kick. And overall, they just wear teams down, right? It's kind of like an old school running attack in football in the way that they just keep going there. They're also 2nd in the leagues in points per game on drives. They're only behind the OKC Thunder in that area. So not only are they getting out in pace, they're driving to the lane a lot, right? They're able to operate in the half court. And that's just another thing that just really goes well for this team in the way that they're able to do it. Every player that comes on the court for the Memphis Grizzlies is able to get to the rim. And that's not only a system thing, but that just shows how well coached they are, right? And of course, you got to look at Ja Morant, right? That's another big part of this. If Ja Morant is going to be healthy for this Memphis Grizzlies team, the dynamic that he offers and his hunger, his pettiness at times, his leadership, all that could be huge for this Grizzlies team. And you look at it, technically, Ja Morant isn't even leading the Memphis Grizzlies in scoring. That's Jaren Jackson Jr., who, oh, by the way, is back to his super efficient self, scoring nearly 60% in the paint as well. 69% to be exact. That's 10% up from the 59% he did last year. This team attacks in this paint, and just the sum of the parts end up being better for this team overall. The Memphis Grizzlies are a team full of dogs, right? And then also look at it, the rebounding, right? That's another thing. What the Memphis Grizzlies do is they dominate the glass on both sides. When you look at the offensive side of the ball, they are number 4 in the league right now in offensive rebounding rate and 2nd in second chance points per game. And that is huge. And then especially when you look as well at Zach Edey right now, who has the 4th best offensive rebounding rate in the league at 7.7 second chance points per 100 possessions. That's 2nd in the NBA. The way that this Memphis Grizzlies plays, it plays a modern style. It does it without a barrage of threes like some other teams do, and they're not a one-dimensional team. where some teams just kill you offensively or are great defensive teams, this is a team that's top 5 in the league in both areas. I do think this, right? While it is what it is and it ain't what it ain't, one of the things that may be time to start doing is talking about this Memphis Grizzlies team like we do the other top teams in the league. Now, would I pick them to go past the OKC Thunder? No. Now, I do think that they can make that series very, very interesting, right? And so now when you look at the top of at the Western Conference, for real, all of the top 5 seeds you can see winning a title. The OKC Thunder, the Rockets. The Rockets are the one because they're young. This is their first time playing at this level, this consistently. Of course, there's some questions there, but the Memphis Grizzlies, the Dallas Mavericks, like these are all teams that could come out the West. And the West playoffs this year are going to be so fun and intriguing to watch as long as all these teams make it in, as far as make it in healthy, I should say, throughout that in the playoff series. And that's one thing you want to see, right? I hope that this year we have the majority of teams healthy, right? That's just my personal opinion. But when you look at it as well, since November 19th, right, we're December 25th, 24th, however you're looking at that, the Memphis Grizzlies have lost 4 games. 4. And over that time, they've beaten teams like the Golden State Warriors. They've beaten teams like the Boston Celtics. They have lost to the Dallas Mavericks, of course, things like that. They split a series with Denver. But they listen, this is a Memphis Grizzlies team that I think more people should be looking at, more people should be talking about. And we'll see where they can finish at this season. But the Memphis Grizzlies are a fun team. They're one of my most watched teams in the NBA as well, right along with the Bulls and the Thunder. And we'll see how that can go. Now, before we go, I do want to talk about this, man. And this is just as a fun thing. Well, not fun, but Joel Embiid crashed out last night. I don't think you could describe it as any way other than a crash out. For those that didn't see it, we're going to go ahead and play it here.
Priority getting the ball in the basket.
Embiid lights into Wemby on his chest. And Embiid's going to get whistled for the offensive foul. And that's number 3 on the big fella. Going over to Schroeder, who was the official who initially ejected Andre Drummond. And Joe's got to be careful. He's getting real heated now. And
She just threw him out.
Yep, she did.
Wow.
And he's got to be really careful.
This is unbelievable.
He's going over there now.
This is unbelievable. This is Mickey Mouse. This isn't real. This is a joke.
Assistant coach is trying to calm Joe down.
This is a joke.
That we will step away and be back. Got a wild one tonight.
And Joel Embiid in that instance was just, I don't know, like I get it that refs can be frustrating to deal with. Make no mistake about it, right? And getting injected is something that, listen, Joel Embiid, we've already not had you on the court so much because of your injuries. The last thing that you need is to be missing games against, it was a team like the San Antonio Spurs. Yes, make no mistake about it, but like you cannot afford to be missing these games. Your team needs you out there. Their team is still trying to figure it out. Yes, the 76ers were still able to pull out that game, 111 to 106, but you didn't need that, right? And Joel got to calm down. I get it. This has been a frustrating year for Joel Embiid already. You could feel it. But only playing 14 minutes in a game where your team is still trying to dig themselves out of the early hole, and you're doing a pretty damn good job at it. This crash out by Jimmy Butler, I'm sure it's going to come via, some criticism from the league and things like that. He didn't address it in the post-game interview. But you know what it is. And even Victor Wembanyama saying this, he just stepped on my foot. I didn't expect the foul to be called. I just fell. Right? So don't get me wrong. Let me ask you guys on this, right? I want to throw this one over to you guys. Do you think that the foul call that led to the ejection, like the foul call itself, should that have been called? And then, like, I know that it hasn't been as much where we've had like refs trying to show up players as much as that we've had in the past, but it just still feels a little, I'll just say this. I overall hope that this is not a trend that we start seeing in the NBA because players are like, there's still humans out there, right? Let them be frustrated for a moment. But Joel Embiid did, come at the ref a little too hard as well. But let me know what you guys think on that down below. That's my time for tonight. Make sure you guys are following the show at NBA Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-212-9227. 270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball related, and we'll see you guys the next time I feel like making a video. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.